Step right up, ladies and gentlemen, to the dazzling spectacle of the 1893 Chicago World's Fair. Imagine a city reborn from ashes, showing off its new brilliance to the world. Electricity lights up the night. Brand new inventions promise a brighter future, and millions flock to witness this grand celebration of human achievement. But just a few miles away from the gleaming white city, a much darker structure cast a long, sinister shadow. A building that would become known to history not as a hotel, but as the Murder Castle. And its architect, a man who would go down as one of America's first and most notorious serial killers, H.H. Holmes. Our story begins with a man named Herman Webster Mudgett, who arrived in Chicago in 1886. He was handsome, charismatic, and dripping with ambition. He quickly changed his name to Henry Howard Holmes, perhaps to escape a past already littered with scams and suspicion. Holmes was a doctor, a pharmacist, a businessman, a master of disguise and deception. He settled in the Englewood neighborhood and, through a series of cunning and ruthless maneuvers, took over a local drugstore. But his ambitions were far grander than selling potions and pills. Across the street from the pharmacy, he began constructing a building that would become the stuff of nightmares. Locals called it the Castle. It was a bizarre, three-story labyrinth that seemed to be under constant construction. Holmes hired and fired crews so frequently that no one but him ever truly understood the building's full, twisted layout. And that was exactly the point. On the ground floor, there were legitimate-looking storefronts. The upper floors, however, were a different story. They were a maze of over 100 rooms, many of them windowless. There were staircases that led to nowhere, doors that opened onto brick walls, and hallways that twisted into dead ends. Imagine being a young woman, new to the city, drawn by the promise of work at the World's Fair. You see an ad for an affordable room at a new hotel, or a job as a stenographer for the charming Dr. Holmes. You check in, and at first, everything seems normal. But then you notice the strange silence of the place, the way the doors lock from the outside, the faint, sweet smell of chemicals in the air. Holmes had rigged his castle with a master control panel in his office. He could lock doors, control gas jets that fed into the sealed rooms, and listen to his victims' final, terrifying moments through a series of pipes. The rooms were his traps. Some were lined with iron plates and asbestos, essentially soundproof vaults. Others were fitted with gas lines, allowing him to asphyxiate his guests at the flick of a switch. He had trapdoors in the floors and secret chutes, greased with oil, that led directly to the basement. And the basement. The basement was a true chamber of horrors. It was a surgical theater, a crematorium, and a laboratory all in one. Here, Holmes would dissect his victims on a bloody operating table. He had acid vats to dissolve bodies, a kiln powerful enough to burn human remains to ash, and pits filled with quicklime. He meticulously stripped the flesh from skeletons, which he would then clean and sell to medical schools, profiting from his monstrous acts even after death. For years, Holmes operated with terrifying impunity. Most of his victims were women, employees, lovers, and hotel guests. He would charm them, swindle them out of their life savings, and then, when they were no longer useful, lead them into his maze of death. The constant stream of people coming to Chicago for the World's Fair provided the perfect cover. In a city bustling with millions of transients, who would notice a few missing people? A young woman who came to seek her fortune and simply vanished was a common, tragic story. Holmes preyed on the anonymous and the hopeful. The castle's reign of terror couldn't last forever. Holmes's downfall came not from his murders, but from his constant scams. An insurance fraud scheme involving a faked death went wrong, leading a determined Philadelphia detective named Frank Geyer to pick up his trail. Geyer was a bulldog. He followed Holmes across the country, slowly unraveling a web of lies, cons, and missing persons. His investigation eventually led him back to Chicago and to the ominous building in Englewood. When police finally entered the castle, they were unprepared for what they found. They uncovered the secret passages, the gas chambers, the soundproof vaults. They unearthed the bone fragments, the piles of human hair, the clothes of women and children hidden in the walls. The basement revealed its gruesome secrets, the dissection tables stained with old blood, the giant furnace, the vats of acid. The city of Chicago, once so proud of its World's Fair, was now gripped by a story of unimaginable horror. The newspapers dubbed the building the Murder Castle, and the name stuck. Holmes was eventually captured in Boston. He was a cool customer, a pathological liar who confessed to 27 murders, then later claimed it was over 150, and at his trial insisted he was innocent of all but 2. The true number of his victims is still debated today, with some estimates reaching as high as 200. The people he killed were lost in the chaos of his labyrinth and the anonymity of a bustling city. He was tried, convicted, and hanged in Philadelphia in 1896. He reportedly remained calm until the very end, his neck not snapping immediately, leaving him to slowly strangle for over 15 minutes. A grim end for a grim man. But what happened to the Murder Castle? Shortly after Holmes's arrest, the building mysteriously burned to the ground. Some say it was an arson attack by angry locals who wanted to erase the stain on their neighborhood. Others whisper a more supernatural explanation. With so much death and suffering concentrated in one place, the story of the castle didn't end with the fire. It simply changed. The physical structure was gone, but its evil legacy lingered. This is where the story of the Murder Castle bleeds into the ghost lore of Chicago. The site where the castle once stood, at 63rd and Wallace, is now occupied by a post office. For decades, postal workers and local residents have reported strange occurrences. They speak of an oppressive, heavy feeling that hangs in the air. People report hearing disembodied whispers and footsteps in the empty basement. Some claim to see shadowy figures darting in the corners of their vision, or feel an icy, unseen presence brush past them. It's said that the tormented spirits of Holmes's victims are forever trapped on the land, unable to move on. The tale of H.H. Holmes and his Murder Castle became more than just a true crime story. It became a founding myth for haunted Chicago. It confirmed people's darkest fears about the anonymity of the big city, that behind a charming smile could lie a monster, and behind an ordinary door could lie an entrance to hell. The story fueled the belief that intense evil can leave a permanent scar on a location, an echo of pain that replays for eternity. Every time a Chicagoan tells a ghost story about a haunted building, the shadow of the Murder Castle looms in the background. It set a precedent. If something this horrific could happen here, what other spirits might be wandering the city's streets and alleys? The Murder Castle was a real place, a monument to one man's depravity. But its legacy is a haunting reminder that some stories are so terrible they refuse to die. They become whispers in the dark, tales told to scare children, and the reason we sometimes look over our shoulder in an empty room. The ghosts of the Murder Castle may not be literal spirits, but the ghost of its story certainly haunts Chicago to this very day, a permanent part of the city's dark and fascinating history. Thanks so much for watching. If you found this story as chillingly fascinating as I did, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into the dark side of history. Let me know in the comments if you've ever heard any local stories about the old Murder Castle site. Stay safe and see you next time.